Jasmine sits at table 12, the one tucked behind a decorative pillar where single guests get exiled. She's beautiful in a way that's both striking and understated, her deep brown skin glowing in the warm light, natural hair styled in elegant twists. But her posture tells a different story. She checks her phone for the third time in 2 minutes, scrolls through nothing, then sets it down with practiced nonchalance. Her burgundy dress, the one she spent 2 weeks' grocery money on because Olivia deserved her best friend to look the part, suddenly feels like a costume. Around her, groups of friends share inside jokes while couples sway to the distant music. She takes a sip of champagne, trying to look occupied, purposeful. Anything but alone. Jasmine, to herself, barely audible, "Come on, Jazz. You survived Mom and Dad's war zone. You can survive one wedding." She forces a smile as a waiter passes, nodding like she's having the time of her life. But her eyes betray her, darting between exits, calculating how long she needs to stay before she can leave without seeming rude. That's when she notices him. George approaches from across the terrace, and everything about him screams money. The perfectly tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, the confident stride, the way other guests automatically make space for him. He's handsome in that polished, magazine cover way that usually makes Jasmine invisible. But something's off. His jaw is tight, his eyes scanning the crowd with barely concealed panic. He reaches her table and stops, his breath slightly uneven.
"I know this is going to sound insane, but..."
"Excuse me."
"There's someone here I can't face alone. And you look like you might understand what it feels like to need an escape route."
"I'm sorry, what?"
"Pretend you're with me, please, just for tonight. I know how it sounds, but I'm desperate, and something tells me you might be too."
The words hang in the air between them. Jasmine's grip tightens on her champagne flute. Every rational part of her brain is screaming warnings. Strange men, desperate requests, the last time someone asked her for a favor. But there's something in his eyes that stops her from saying no immediately. Not manipulation, fear, raw, genuine fear.
"Who are you running from?"
"Someone who's very good at destroying things. I'm George, by the way. George Morrison."
"Jasmine, and this is either the stupidest thing I've ever done, or exactly what we both need."
As their hands touch, George's shoulders visibly relax for the first time all evening. Neither of them notices the blonde woman in emerald green watching from across the terrace, her smile sharp as broken glass.
"Thank you."
"Don't thank me yet. You don't know what kind of trouble I might be."
The alarm screams at 7 a.m., but Jasmine has been awake for an hour, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that looks like a question mark. It's Saturday, which means most people are sleeping in, planning brunches, enjoying the luxury of choice. For Jasmine, Saturday means the same thing every day has meant since she was 8 years old: survival. She sits up in bed, her laptop balanced on her knees, responding to client emails before most people have their first cup of coffee. The marketing firm pays well, but well is relative when you've been financially independent since childhood. Every dollar has a purpose, every expense calculated against the specter of going without. Her phone buzzes. A text from Olivia: "Can't wait to see you today. You're going to love the venue. And who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone." Winking face. Jasmine stares at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you tell your college roommate, your only real friend, that weddings feel like watching someone speak a language you'll never understand? That love, to you, has always been conditional, transactional, something that disappears the moment you stop being useful? She types back, "So excited. See you soon." The lie comes easier than the truth. She stands before her closet, which contains exactly 12 items of clothing, each chosen for versatility and durability. The burgundy dress hangs alone, tags still attached. She'd bought it 3 weeks ago, then returned it, then bought it again. It represented 2 weeks of eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, but Olivia deserved better than her friend showing up looking like she was struggling. Because that's the thing about surviving since childhood, you become expert at making it look like you're thriving. She applies makeup with the precision of someone who learned early that appearance matters, that being overlooked is sometimes safer than being seen, but being dismissed is always dangerous. Foundation to even out her complexion, a subtle highlight that makes her skin glow, lipstick that suggests confidence she doesn't feel. In the mirror, she practices her smile. The one that says, "I'm doing great," instead of, "I'm tired." The one that says, "I chose to be here," instead of, "I'm terrified of disappointing the one person who still includes me." Her phone buzzes again. This time it's a notification from her banking app. Low balance alert. She silences it without looking. The courtroom smells like old wood and broken promises. Jasmine sits in the hallway, her legs too short to touch the floor, swinging back and forth while lawyers in expensive suits decide her fate. Through the door, she can hear her parents' voices raised in anger, each trying to prove the other is the worse parent. "Your Honor, he never even wanted children." She's using Jasmine as a weapon. The child would be better off. 8-year-old Jasmine presses her hands to her ears, but the words seep through anyway. She doesn't understand custody battles or financial settlements, but she understands abandonment. She understands that sometimes, when adults can't agree, children become the cost of their war. The door opens and her court-appointed advocate kneels beside her. "Jasmine, honey, you're going to stay with your aunt for a while. Your parents, they need some time to work things out." But Jasmine already knows the truth that adults are too kind to say. Sometimes working things out means leaving children behind. Jasmine navigates Seattle traffic in her 12-year-old Honda Civic, the one luxury she allows herself being the premium Spotify subscription that fills the silence. The wedding venue is in Woodinville, wine country, where every estate costs more than she'll make in 5 years. She thinks about Olivia, her college roommate who used to split ramen packets with her, who understood what it meant to count every penny. Now Olivia works in tech, engaged to a software engineer, living the Seattle success story. The friendship survived college, survived distance, but Jasmine wonders if it can survive the growing gap between their realities. The truth is, Jasmine is happy for her friend. Genuinely, deeply happy. But happiness and heartbreak aren't mutually exclusive, and watching Olivia build the life Jasmine has never dared to want feels like staring at the sun, beautiful and impossible and painful all at once. The venue is exactly what Jasmine expected, breathtaking and intimidating in equal measure. Rolling hills covered in grapevines stretch toward the horizon, and the chateau itself looks like something from a European postcard. Valet parking, because of course there's valet parking. Jasmine hands over her keys to a teenager who probably makes more in tips this weekend than she spends on groceries in a month. She smooths her dress, checks her reflection in the car window one more time, and transforms. Shoulders back, smile in place, confidence worn like armor. The ceremony is held in the vineyard itself, white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an archway decorated with flowers and baby's breath. Jasmine finds a seat toward the back, close enough to show support, far enough away to remain invisible. Around her, guests chatter about vacation homes and stock portfolios and private schools for children not yet conceived. She spots George during the processional, 3 rows ahead and to the right. Even sitting, his posture suggests power, comfort in spaces like this. His golden hair is perfectly styled, his tuxedo tailored to perfection. He looks like he belongs here, like he was born for venues like this, for gatherings where champagne flows like water and everyone knows exactly which fork to use. What Jasmine doesn't see is the way George's hands clench in his lap during the vows, or how his jaw tightens when the officiant talks about love conquering all obstacles. She doesn't notice him checking his phone repeatedly, or the way his eyes scan the crowd like he's looking for someone specific, someone he's hoping not to find. Olivia walks down the aisle in a dress that costs more than Jasmine's rent, radiant in the way brides are supposed to be. Her fiancé, Marcus, cries when he sees her, and Jasmine feels her chest tighten. Not with envy, exactly, but with the recognition of something she's never experienced. When was the last time someone looked at her like that? Like she was magic, like she was home, like she was worth everything? The answer comes too quickly, never. Dearly beloved, the officiant begins, and Jasmine closes her eyes, letting the words wash over her. Words about partnership and commitment and choosing each other every day. Pretty words that make beautiful promises she's never seen kept. Her parents promised to love each other too, once upon a time. She has their wedding album buried in a box somewhere, evidence of a love story that turned into a war zone with her caught in the crossfire. You may kiss the bride. The crowd erupts in applause, and Jasmine claps along, her smile genuine despite her complicated feelings. Olivia deserves this joy, this certainty, this faith in forever. That Jasmine can't quite believe in it doesn't make it less beautiful. The reception area is decorated with fairy lights and more flowers than most people see in a lifetime. Jasmine accepts a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and positions herself near the appetizer table, a strategic location that makes her look social while requiring minimal interaction. She watches the other guests with the keen observation skills of someone who learned early to read rooms, to identify safe spaces and potential threats. There are college friends she recognizes but doesn't know well enough to approach. There are family members deep in conversation about people and places foreign to her experience. There are couples, so many couples, comfortable in their shared jokes and casual intimacy. A group of women near the bar catches her attention. They're discussing their recent trip to Tuscany, their children's private school applications, their husband's latest promotions. Their problems are real to them, but they exist in a universe parallel to Jasmine's reality. Excuse me, are you Jasmine? She turns to find Marcus's mother, an elegant woman in her 60s with kind eyes and perfect posture. Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. The ceremony was beautiful. Oh, we're so glad you could make it. Olivia talks about you all the time. She says you were roommates in college. Yeah, she's wonderful. Marcus is very lucky. We think so too. And what do you do, dear? It's an innocent question, but Jasmine has learned to navigate these conversations carefully. The truth, that she works in marketing for a mid-sized firm, lives paycheck to paycheck, and has no family to speak of, doesn't quite fit the narrative of wedding guest small talk. I'm in marketing. Digital strategy, mostly. It keeps me busy. How interesting. Are you married? Children? The questions that always come, the ones that assume a certain trajectory of life that Jasmine has never been able to imagine for herself. Not yet. Still figuring things out. It's her standard response, neutral enough to end the conversation without seeming rude. Marcus's mother smiles and moves on to other guests, leaving Jasmine alone again with her champagne and her carefully constructed facade. That's when she notices George watching her from across the terrace, his expression unreadable but intense. Their eyes meet for a moment, and something passes between them. Recognition, maybe, or the understanding that comes from spotting another person who doesn't quite belong. She looks away first, but the feeling lingers. The sense that he sees something in her that she thought she'd hidden better. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she's not the only one at this wedding who's pretending to be someone else. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats for dinner. Jasmine checks her phone one more time. no emergencies that would justify leaving early, and heads toward table 12. The table behind the decorative pillar, where the single people sit, where she can observe without being observed. She settles into her chair, smooths her dress, and prepares for 2 hours of polite conversation with strangers about topics she can't quite relate to. Around her, couples hold hands, friends share stories, families laugh at inside jokes. She takes another sip of champagne and checks her exits. She has no idea that in less than 5 minutes, a stranger in a perfectly tailored tuxedo will approach her table with desperation in his eyes and a request that will change everything. She has no idea that her carefully constructed armor is about to be tested in ways she never imagined. She has no idea that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is say yes to someone who needs saving. But then again, Jasmine has been surviving the impossible since she was 8 years old. Maybe it's time to see what happens when survival meets something else entirely. Something that might, just might, look like hope. George's hand is still warm in hers when the first test arrives. An older gentleman in an expensive suit approaches their table, his face lighting up with recognition. "George Morrison, I didn't expect to see you here tonight." Jasmine feels George's grip tighten almost imperceptibly. This is it, the moment where they either pull off the most spontaneous performance of their lives or crash and burn in front of 100 wedding guests. "Mr. Williamson," George says, standing smoothly, his voice carrying none of the panic she'd heard moments before. "Good to see you. I'd like you to meet Jasmine." She rises beside him, and suddenly they're touching, his hand on the small of her back, natural and warm. To anyone watching, they look like they've been together for months. "Jasmine, this is Robert Williamson. He sits on the board at Microsoft with my father." "Pleasure to meet you," Jasmine says, extending her hand with a smile that's become second nature over years of client presentations. "George has told me so much about the board meetings. It's a safe lie, generic enough to be believable, specific enough to sound authentic." George's eyebrows rise slightly, impressed, maybe, or surprised that she's already thinking like a conspirator. "How long have you two been dating?" Williamson asks, and Jasmine feels her chest tighten. They didn't prepare for this. They don't have a story. But George doesn't miss a beat. 3 months next week, he says, his voice carrying exactly the right mix of happiness and nervousness. "We met at that little coffee shop on Pine Street. She was reading Toni Morrison, and I made some pretentious comment about literature. She shut me down beautifully." Jasmine stares at him, not just because he's a surprisingly good liar, but because the story feels real. Specific, like maybe it's something he's imagined before. "I told him that if he was going to interrupt my reading, he'd better have something more interesting to say than mansplaining Beloved to someone who'd read it 3 times, she adds, falling into the rhythm of their improvised history. Williamson laughs. "Sounds like you met your match, George. Your father always said you needed someone who wouldn't put up with your nonsense." Something flickers across George's face at the mention of his father, but it's gone so quickly Jasmine might have imagined it. "He's probably right," George says. "I'm lucky she gave me a second chance." "Well, enjoy the evening. Beautiful wedding. And Jasmine, welcome to the family madness that is Seattle's tech elite." As Williamson walks away, Jasmine and George sink back into their chairs. For a moment, neither speaks. "That was..." Jasmine begins. "Terrifying," George finishes. "But we pulled it off. The coffee shop story. That was good. I might have been thinking on my feet, but I wasn't entirely making it up." He looks at her directly. "There's a coffee shop on Pine Street where I've seen you before. 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. You were reading, looked completely absorbed. I almost said something then, but you chickened out?" There's teasing in her voice, but also surprise. "He noticed her before tonight?" But I figured someone like you wouldn't be interested in someone like me. The honesty in his voice catches her off guard. Someone like him, wealthy, successful, the kind of man who probably has women throwing themselves at him regularly, thinking she'd be out of his league? You don't know anything about someone like me, she says, but there's no bite in it. Maybe not. But I'd like to. Before she can respond, the blonde woman in emerald green appears at their table. Up close, she's stunning in the way that money can buy: perfect teeth, professional highlights, jewelry that costs more than Jasmine's car. But her smile is sharp, predatory. Hello, George. Every muscle in George's body goes rigid. Sarah. So this is the ex-wife. The one he's been desperate to avoid. Jasmine can see why. Sarah radiates the kind of controlled anger that comes from someone used to getting her way, someone who's been denied something she considers rightfully hers. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? The pause before friend is deliberate, loaded with implications. Jasmine recognizes the tactic. She's seen it in corporate boardrooms, the way powerful people use silence and suggestion as weapons. Sarah, this is Jasmine. Jasmine, my ex-wife, Sarah. Jasmine stands, extending her hand. Nice to meet you. Sarah's handshake lasts a beat too long, her eyes scanning Jasmine from head to toe like she's cataloging evidence. How lovely. And how unexpected. George usually has a very specific type. Another deliberate cut. Jasmine feels the familiar burn of being judged, of being found wanting by someone who's decided her worth based on appearance, on assumptions about her background. But she's been handling bullies since elementary school. Well, Jasmine says with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, I guess that shows how much people can grow and change. Don't you think, honey? She places her hand on George's arm, and the endearment slips out naturally, authentically. George covers her hand with his, and for a moment, the touch feels real. Sarah's eyes narrow slightly. Indeed. George, I was hoping we could have a word about Lily's recital next week. We can discuss that through our lawyers, Sarah. You know that. She's asking for you specifically, but I suppose your social calendar is more important than your daughter's piano performance. It's a masterful manipulation, using the child as leverage while simultaneously attacking George's priorities and questioning Jasmine's place in his life. Jasmine watches George's face crumble slightly, watches him caught between wanting to defend himself and not wanting to escalate in public. This is the moment Jasmine could walk away or should walk away. This isn't her fight, isn't her problem. She doesn't owe George Morrison anything, and getting between exes in a custody battle is the kind of drama she's spent her adult life avoiding. But she recognizes Sarah's tactics. She's seen them before, felt them before. The way certain people use children as weapons, the way they twist love into control, the way they make their victims question their own reality. She's 8 years old again, listening to lawyers argue over her like she's property. She's 25 and discovering that her ex-boyfriend has been using her social connections to expand his business network while telling her she's paranoid for questioning his motives. Actually, Jasmine says, her voice steady and clear, we were just talking about Lily's recital. George is so proud of her progress. What day is it again, sweetheart? Tuesday or Wednesday? It's a guess, but George picks up the thread immediately. Wednesday, 7 p.m. at the community center. I'll make sure to adjust my schedule, Jasmine continues. I'd love to meet her properly. George talks about her constantly. Sarah's perfect composure slips for just a moment. She wasn't expecting this. A woman who wouldn't be intimidated, who wouldn't back down, who would claim space in George's life that Sarah clearly considers her territory. How nice, Sarah says. Well, I suppose I'll see you both there then. She turns and walks away, her emerald dress swishing with controlled fury. George stares after her, then at Jasmine. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. The words surprise her with their conviction. She was trying to make you choose between standing up for yourself and protecting your relationship with your daughter. That's not a choice any parent should have to make. You don't understand what you just got yourself into. Maybe not, but I understand bullies. And I understand what it's like to be used as ammunition in someone else's war. Something shifts in George's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. There's something else, he says quietly. Something I should have told you before you agreed to this. Jasmine's stomach tightens. Of course there's something else. There's always something else. The custody hearing is next month. Sarah's been building a case that I'm unstable, unreliable. A string of failed relationships, no commitment to family values. Having you here tonight, if she thinks we're serious, she'll use me against you. She'll use everything against me. Your job, your background, the fact that we haven't been dating long. She'll find ways to make our relationship look like evidence that I can't provide a stable home environment. Jasmine absorbs this information. 3 months ago, she might have walked away immediately. But 3 months ago, she was still letting her ex-boyfriend use her apartment as his personal office while he told her she was too needy for wanting to spend time with him. What's your daughter like? She asks. The question catches George off guard. What? Lily. What's she like? George's entire demeanor softens. She's everything. 7 years old, obsessed with marine biology and piano. She wants to be an oceanographer when she grows up, studies tide pools like other kids study video games. Last weekend she found a starfish and gave me a 20-minute lecture about regeneration. She sounds amazing. She is. She's the best thing I've ever done, the best part of who I am. And Sarah knows that. She knows that threatening my relationship with Lily is the one thing guaranteed to destroy me. Jasmine looks across the reception, where couples are beginning to move toward the dance floor. The band is playing something slow and romantic, and the bride and groom are having their first dance. Everyone looks so happy, so certain of their choices and their futures. She thinks about being 8 years old and powerless, about watching adults make decisions that would shape her entire life without considering how those decisions might feel from her perspective. She thinks about George's daughter, 7 years old and caught between parents who can't stop hurting each other. Okay, she says. Okay, what? I'm in. For real this time. Not just for tonight, but whatever this turns into. Whatever you need to protect your relationship with Lily. George stares at her. Jasmine, you don't understand what you're saying. This could go on for months. Sarah's lawyers will investigate you, dig into your life, try to find things to use against us both. You could lose your privacy, your peace of mind. Why would you do that for someone you just met? The answer comes from somewhere deeper than logic, somewhere that remembers what it felt like to be small and scared and used as a pawn in adult games. Because every kid deserves at least one parent who'll fight for them without sacrificing their integrity. And because, she pauses, surprised by her own honesty, because I've spent so much of my life protecting myself from getting hurt that I forgot what it feels like to protect someone else. The wedding continues around them. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses and celebration of new beginnings. But at table 12, behind a decorative pillar, 2 strangers are making a pact that will change both their lives. Neither of them realizes that Sarah is watching from across the dance floor, her phone already out, already making calls that will set their new reality into motion faster than they could have imagined. Neither of them knows that by tomorrow morning, their private agreement will become very public business. But for now, in this moment, they're just 2 people who've decided to trust each other with something precious and fragile and worth protecting. For now, that feels like enough. We should dance, George says, watching other couples join the bride and groom on the dance floor. If we're going to convince people we're together, we should probably look comfortable with each other. Jasmine's throat tightens. She learned to slow dance in middle school gym class, but she's never slow danced with someone who mattered, never had to make physical intimacy look natural and easy. The band has switched from romantic ballads to upbeat classics that have drawn most of the wedding party onto the dance floor. Jasmine and George have settled into their roles with surprising ease, sharing inside jokes that aren't entirely fabricated, touching with an intimacy that feels less forced with each passing moment, weaving through conversations with other guests like they've been a couple for months instead of hours. But Jasmine notices the way George's jaw tightens whenever Sarah passes within earshot, how his eyes follow her movements across the room like he's tracking a predator. Sarah, for her part, seems to be working the room with purpose, chatting with guests, laughing at jokes, playing the role of the gracious ex-wife while her eyes constantly drift back to their table. She's planning something, Jasmine murmurs as they watch Sarah lean in close to whisper something to an older woman Jasmine doesn't recognize. Sarah's always planning something, George replies, but there's resignation in his voice rather than anger. The question is whether I'll see it coming in time to protect Lily from the fallout. Tell me about her. Really tell me. What's Sarah like when she's not performing for an audience? George is quiet for a long moment, watching his ex-wife command attention across the dance floor. Brilliant, he says finally. That's what made me fall in love with her in the first place. Harvard Law, top of her class, the kind of mind that could dissect any argument and find its weakness in seconds. But she uses that intelligence like a scalpel now, cutting away at everything that threatens her sense of control. When did it go wrong? I'm not sure it was ever right. His honesty surprises them both. I think we were both trying to build something that looked like love from the outside without understanding what it was supposed to feel like from the inside. Sarah wanted security, status, the life that looked perfect in Christmas cards. I don't know what I wanted. Maybe just to not disappoint anyone. Jasmine understands that feeling, the exhaustion that comes from performing happiness instead of pursuing it. And Lily, George's expression transforms completely. Lily was the first time I understood what it meant to love someone more than yourself. The first time I was willing to fight for something instead of just accepting whatever seemed reasonable. Sarah always said I was weak, that I never stood up for anything that mattered. But she was wrong. I just hadn't found anything worth standing up for until Lily came along. Before Jasmine can respond, her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. She shows the screen to George, whose face goes pale. How did she get your number? I have no idea. But even as Jasmine says it, she's mentally reviewing the evening, thinking about how Sarah could have obtained her contact information. She hadn't given it to anyone, hadn't signed any guest books. She's resourceful, George says grimly. And she works fast. The next text arrives before they can discuss strategy. Private bar area. 5 minutes. Come alone or I start making calls. What kind of calls? Jasmine asks. George runs his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. The kind that could end my custody arrangement before the hearing even happens. Sarah has connections everywhere. Judges, social workers, family court mediators. If she wanted to, she could make my life very complicated very quickly. Jasmine stares at the phone, at the threat disguised as a polite request. Every instinct she's developed since childhood is screaming at her to walk away, to protect herself from getting caught in someone else's crossfire. This isn't her battle, isn't her child, isn't her life to complicate. But then she looks at George, this man who's already admitted he doesn't know how to fight for himself but would die protecting his daughter, and she realizes that walking away isn't actually an option anymore. I'll go, she says. Absolutely not. This is exactly what she wants, to isolate you, to get you away from witnesses so she can say whatever she wants about what happened. Then you'll have to trust that I can handle myself. Jasmine, you don't understand. Sarah doesn't just argue. She finds your deepest insecurities and uses them against you. She'll research you, find out about your childhood, your financial situation, your ex-boyfriend, every vulnerability you've ever had, and she'll turn them into weapons. The description hits too close to home. Jasmine has spent years building walls around those exact vulnerabilities, learning to present a successful, confident exterior that hides the scared 8-year-old still afraid of being abandoned. Maybe, she says, but I've been handling bullies longer than I've been handling anything else. And besides, what's the alternative? Let her control the entire situation because we're afraid of what she might say. George studies her face, looking for something he seems to find. You really don't back down, do you? Not from people who think they can intimidate me into silence. Jasmine stands, smoothing her dress. Besides, I'm curious what she thinks she has on me after knowing me for 3 hours. The private bar area is tucked behind the main reception space, elegantly appointed with leather furniture and dim lighting that suggests serious conversations and expensive whiskey. Sarah is already there, still stunning in her emerald dress, but up close, Jasmine can see the calculation behind her beauty, the way she's positioned herself with the light behind her, the way she's chosen the chair that forces visitors to look up at her slightly. Jasmine, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Sarah. What do you want? Sarah smiles, and it's sharp as a blade. I want to help you avoid making a very expensive mistake. Generous of you. I've done some research since we met. Jasmine Williams, 28, marketing coordinator at Preston and Associates. Graduated from University of Washington, decent grades but nothing spectacular. Lives alone in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, drives a 2013 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. No family to speak of, parents divorced when you were 8, both remarried other people, neither particularly interested in staying involved in your life. Each fact lands like a physical blow. Jasmine keeps her expression neutral, but inside, she's 8 years old again, listening to adults discuss her life like she's not in the room. You've been busy, Jasmine says evenly. The interesting part, Sarah continues, is what you're not. You're not wealthy. You're not connected. You're not the kind of woman George Morrison typically dates. In fact, you're exactly the kind of woman his family would never approve of, struggling financially, no social connections, no prestigious background to bring to the Morrison name. Is there a point to this character assassination, or are you just practicing for the custody hearing? The point, dear, is that you're being used. Again. Sarah leans forward slightly. Yes, I know about Marcus. Your ex-boyfriend who convinced you to co-sign for his business loan, then disappeared with the money and left you holding the debt. The same ex-boyfriend who used your marketing connections to build his client base, then dumped you the moment he didn't need you anymore. Sound familiar? The words hit harder than Jasmine expected because they're true, and because Sarah has clearly done her homework. Marcus had been charming, ambitious, exactly the kind of man who seemed like he could give Jasmine the life she'd never quite believed she deserved. Until she realized that he saw her as a resource to be mined rather than a person to be loved. George isn't Marcus, Jasmine says, but even she can hear the uncertainty in her voice. Isn't he? Let me ask you something. What exactly has George told you about his situation? About why he needed you to pretend to be his girlfriend tonight? He told me you were here, that he couldn't face you alone. Sarah laughs, and the sound is genuinely amused. Oh, honey, is that really what you think this is about? George avoiding an awkward conversation with his ex-wife. Jasmine's stomach starts to turn. What are you talking about? George Morrison is worth approximately $47 million. His trust fund alone generates more in interest each month than you make in a year. His family owns Morrison Tech, one of the largest software companies in the Pacific Northwest. They have houses in Seattle, Aspen, and Martha's Vineyard. George himself owns 3 properties, drives a car that costs more than most people's houses, and hasn't worked a day in his life that wasn't handed to him by his father. I know he's wealthy. That's not exactly a secret. But what you don't know is that George's entire custody case hinges on proving he's stable, mature, capable of providing a consistent home environment for Lily. What you don't know is that his lawyers have advised him that being seen with a serious girlfriend, especially one who appears to be from a similar social background, would significantly strengthen his case. The room tilts slightly. Jasmine grips the arm of her chair. What are you saying? I'm saying that George Morrison didn't approach you because he was desperate to avoid his ex-wife. He approached you because his legal team told him he needed a girlfriend, and you were sitting alone at a wedding looking like exactly the kind of woman who might be grateful enough for his attention to play along. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Think about it, Jasmine. A man like George Morrison, worth tens of millions of dollars, approaching a woman like you at a wedding. What are the odds that's a coincidence? What are the odds that he just happened to notice you, just happened to find you attractive enough to risk approaching, just happened to need exactly the kind of help you were perfectly positioned to provide? Jasmine's mind is racing, replaying every moment of the evening. George's smooth approach, his perfectly crafted story about the coffee shop, the way he'd known exactly what to say to make her feel special, chosen, needed. The way he'd revealed just enough vulnerability to make her want to protect him, just enough charm to make her forget to protect herself. You're lying, she says, but the words sound hollow even to her. Am I? Think about what he told you about the custody case. How Sarah, meaning me, was trying to paint him as unstable. How having you here tonight would somehow help his case. Did he mention that his lawyers specifically advised him to find a girlfriend before the hearing? Did he mention that appearing committed and stable is worth approximately $12 million in trust fund payments that he'll lose if he doesn't get primary custody of Lily? The number hits Jasmine like a physical blow. $12 million. More money than she'll see in 10 lifetimes, riding on George's ability to convince a judge that he's ready to be a primary parent. No, she whispers. He wouldn't, he's not like that. Sweetie, Sarah says, and for the first time, her voice carries something that might be genuine sympathy. Men like George Morrison don't have to be consciously cruel to be destructive. They're so used to getting what they want that they genuinely don't consider the cost to other people. He probably doesn't even think of it as using you. He probably thinks of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement where everybody wins. Jasmine's phone buzzes with a text from George. Everything okay? Sarah's been gone for 20 minutes. Getting worried. Sarah glances at the phone. He's probably wondering if his plan is working. Whether you're buying the story he sold you. Why are you telling me this? Jasmine asks. What do you get out of warning me? Because I know what it's like to be used by a Morrison man. I know what it's like to think you're building something real only to discover you were just playing a part in someone else's script. And because... Sarah pauses, her mask slipping slightly, because George doesn't deserve Lily if he's willing to manipulate innocent people to get her. The words hang in the air between them. Jasmine stares at Sarah, trying to separate truth from manipulation, trying to understand if this warning is genuine concern or just another layer of the game that's being played around her. Her phone buzzes again. Jasmine, where are you? Starting to worry. He does seem concerned, Sarah observes. But then $47 million is a lot to worry about. Jasmine walks back toward the main reception area in a daze, Sarah's words echoing in her mind. The wedding that had seemed magical an hour ago now feels surreal, like she's watching someone else's life through glass. The music is too loud, the laughter too bright, the whole celebration a mockery of the authentic connection she thought she'd been building. She sees George before he sees her, standing near their table, checking his phone anxiously, running his hand through his hair the way he does when he's nervous. When he looks up and spots her, his face floods with relief. There you are. I was starting to think Sarah had kidnapped you. He reaches for her hand, but she pulls back slightly. The movement is small, but he notices immediately. What happened? What did she say to you? Tell me about your trust fund, Jasmine says quietly. George goes very still. Around them, the wedding continues. Couples dancing, friends laughing, the bride and groom cutting their cake. But in their small bubble, everything has stopped. What did she tell you? I want to hear it from you. The trust fund. The $12 million. Your lawyer's advice about finding a stable girlfriend. George closes his eyes briefly, and Jasmine knows with crushing certainty that Sarah was telling the truth. It's not what you think, he says. Then tell me what it is. Let's go somewhere private, please. Let me explain. Explain here. Now. Her voice carries a hardness she's spent years developing, the armor that goes up when she realizes she's been played. Explain how you forgot to mention that appearing stable is worth $12 million to you. Explain how you forgot to mention that your legal team advised you to find a girlfriend. Explain how all of that had nothing to do with approaching me tonight. George looks around at the other guests, realizes they're starting to attract attention. Jasmine, please. Yes, my lawyers said it would help if I were in a stable relationship. Yes, there's money involved, family money that I don't even want, but that would go to Lily's education, her future. But that's not why I approached you tonight. No? Then why did you? Because I've been watching you for weeks. Because every time I saw you at that coffee shop, you looked like the most interesting person in the room. Because when I saw you sitting alone at this wedding, you looked exactly how I felt. Like someone who was tired of pretending to be fine when you're actually just surviving. The words sound sincere, but Jasmine has heard sincere words before. Marcus had been sincere too, right up until the moment she discovered he'd been lying about everything that mattered. You used me, she says. Just like he did. Just like they all do. No. No, that's not. $47 million, George. That's what Sarah said you're worth. And I'm sitting here in a dress I bought with grocery money, worried about whether I can afford the gas to drive home tonight. Money doesn't mean anything if what? If you can manipulate someone desperate enough to help you get more of it. Jasmine's voice is rising now, attracting more attention from nearby tables. Do you have any idea what it's like to worry about money every single day of your life? To calculate every purchase against the chance that your car might break down or you might get sick? To know that one financial emergency could destroy everything you've worked for? Jasmine, please. And you have $47 million and you still need more. You still need to lie and manipulate and use people like me to make sure you get every penny you think you deserve. George's face has gone pale. It's not about the money. It's about Lily. It's about being able to provide for her, to make sure she never has to worry about anything. By teaching her that it's okay to use people? By showing her that money is more important than honesty? That's not what I'm doing. But Jasmine is done listening. She's 8 years old again, listening to adults prioritize everything except her well-being. She's 25 again, discovering that her boyfriend saw her as a business opportunity rather than a person worth loving. I need to leave, she says. Don't do this. Don't let Sarah win by turning us against each other. There's no us, George. There never was. There was just you using me to solve a problem, and me being stupid enough to think it might be something real. She turns to walk away, but George catches her arm gently. Wait, just wait. You want to know the truth? The complete truth. Something in his voice makes her pause. Yes, my lawyers told me that being in a stable relationship would help my case. Yes, there's family money involved that I'll lose if I don't get primary custody. Yes, I knew that bringing someone to this wedding would send a message to Sarah and to everyone else who's watching this case unfold. Each admission hits like a slap. But, George continues, I also spent 3 weeks building up the courage to talk to you at that coffee shop and losing my nerve every time. I also drove past this venue twice before the ceremony, trying to decide whether to come at all because I knew Sarah would be here and I knew I wasn't strong enough to face her alone. I also saw you sitting by yourself and recognized something I've been feeling for months. The loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who only see what they want from you. Jasmine wants to walk away. Every self-protective instinct she has is screaming at her to leave, to put distance between herself and this man who admits he's been using her, who admits he's worth more money than she can imagine while asking her to risk her emotional safety for his benefit. But there's something in his voice, something raw and desperate and real. I'm not good at this, George says quietly. I'm not good at needing people or asking for help or being vulnerable enough to tell someone that I'm scared I'm going to lose the only person in the world who loves me for who I am instead of what I can provide. But I'm trying to learn. And maybe I started tonight with the wrong motivations, but somewhere between our first dance and right now, this became real for me. How do I know that? Jasmine asks. How do I know what's real and what's just another story designed to get what you need? George is quiet for a long moment. Around them, the wedding is winding down, guests beginning to say their goodbyes, the band packing up their instruments, the magic of the evening dissolving into the ordinary business of cleanup and departure. I guess you don't, he admits finally. I guess that's what trust is, believing someone when you have no way to verify what they're telling you. And I know I haven't earned that from you. I know that admitting I had other motivations for tonight makes everything else I say suspect. He looks at her directly, and she can see the fear in his eyes. Not just of losing the custody case, but of losing whatever fragile connection they've built. But I'm asking anyway. I'm asking you to take a chance on the possibility that something good can come from something that started wrong. I'm asking you to help me become the kind of man who deserves his daughter's respect and your trust. It's the most honest thing anyone has said to her in years. And also the most terrifying. Because the truth is, she wants to say yes. Despite everything Sarah told her, despite George's admissions, despite every reasonable voice in her head telling her to protect herself, she wants to take that chance. But wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it are two different things. And Jasmine Williams has spent 20 years learning the difference. The moment of truth has arrived. Everything is on the table now, George's deception, his genuine feelings, the stakes that go far beyond one evening of pretense. Jasmine must choose between the safety of walking away and the terrifying possibility that sometimes the most broken beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings. But with a 7-year-old's future hanging in the balance and her own heart on the line, can she risk believing in something that started with a lie? Have you ever had to decide whether to trust someone who's already admitted to deceiving you? Jasmine's choice will determine not just her own future, but the future of a little girl who just wants her daddy to come to her piano recital. What would you do? Let us know in the comments. Your perspective might help someone else facing an impossible decision. Jasmine stands there in the fading glow of the wedding reception, George's words hanging in the air between them like a bridge she's afraid to cross. Around them, guests are beginning to leave. Couples gathering their things, friends exchanging final hugs, the celebration slowly dissolving into the ordinary world where consequences matter and pretense can't protect you from reality. I need a minute, she says finally. George nods, understanding that this moment can't be rushed, that whatever decision she makes will shape both their lives in ways they can't yet comprehend. Jasmine walks to the edge of the terrace, where the vineyard stretches into the darkness and the city lights of Seattle twinkle in the distance. She thinks about the 8-year-old girl she used to be, sitting in that courthouse hallway while adults decided her fate. She thinks about Marcus, who taught her that love could be a business transaction disguised as romance. She thinks about all the times she chose safety over possibility, protection over connection. And then she thinks about George's daughter, 7 years old, probably asleep right now, dreaming about tide pools and piano recitals, trusting that the adults in her life will figure out how to love her without destroying each other in the process. Jasmine closes her eyes and makes a choice that terrifies her. She walks back to where George is waiting, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his perfect wedding attire now rumpled with anxiety. "I have conditions," she says. Hope flickers across his face, but he keeps his voice steady. "I'm listening. First, no more lies. Not small ones, not big ones, not convenient omissions. If we're going to do this, I need to know what I'm getting into, all of it, even the parts that make you look bad." Agreed. Second, I meet Lily soon. Not as your fake girlfriend, but as someone who might become part of her life. She deserves to know who's making decisions that affect her future. Agreed. She'll like you. Third, and this is the hardest one, you help me understand your world. I'm not going to pretend to fit into a life I don't understand, but I also can't navigate this custody battle blind. I need to know what Sarah's really capable of, what your family's expectations are, what I'm walking into. George steps closer. And fourth, Jasmine meets his eyes directly. There is no fourth. Those are the conditions for helping you with the custody case. Everything else, whatever this is between us, we figure out as we go. No promises, no guarantees, just honesty about what we're feeling as we feel it. That's terrifying, George admits. If it wasn't terrifying, it wouldn't be worth doing. They stand there for a moment, two people who've just committed to something that could save them both or destroy everything they've worked to build. "So," George says quietly, "what do we do about Sarah? She's probably expecting you to storm out dramatically, maybe throw a drink in my face for good measure." Jasmine considers this. Sarah is still somewhere at the reception, probably watching from the shadows, waiting to see if her psychological warfare worked. "We disappoint her," Jasmine says simply. They find Sarah near the bar, accepting congratulations from other guests on how mature and gracious she's being about George's new relationship. She's playing the role of the understanding ex-wife perfectly, supportive, sophisticated, completely unbothered by her former husband's romantic life. The performance stops the moment she sees Jasmine and George approaching together. "Well," Sarah says, her voice carrying just the right note of surprise, "I wasn't expecting to see you two together after our conversation." "I bet you weren't," Jasmine replies. Her voice is calm, steady, completely different from the shaken woman who left the private bar area 30 minutes ago. Sarah's eyes narrow slightly. This isn't the reaction she was expecting. "I hope you had a chance to think about what we discussed. About the realities of your situation." "I did think about it," Jasmine says. "I thought about a lot of things, actually. Like how you knew exactly which vulnerabilities to target, exactly which insecurities to exploit. Like how you positioned yourself as the concerned outsider looking out for my best interests while simultaneously gathering ammunition to use against George in court." Sarah's composure slips for just a moment. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. You researched me, found out about Marcus, about my childhood, about my financial situation. All of that information is going into your legal strategy, isn't it? Paint me as the desperate, damaged woman George is using to make himself look stable, then use my own background to prove I'm exactly the wrong influence for Lily. George is staring at Jasmine with something approaching awe. She's not just refusing to be manipulated, she's dismantling Sarah's strategy in real time. The thing is, Jasmine continues, you made one crucial mistake in your research. And what's that? Sarah asks, her voice tight. You assumed that being poor and having a difficult childhood made me weak. But it didn't make me weak, Sarah. It made me strong. It taught me how to recognize manipulation, how to spot people who see other people as tools to be used. It taught me the difference between someone who's honestly flawed and someone who's genuinely dangerous. Jasmine takes a step closer, and despite being several inches shorter than Sarah, she somehow seems to loom over her. George told me the truth tonight. Eventually, but he told me. He admitted his mixed motivations, acknowledged his mistakes, asked for help instead of demanding it. You, on the other hand, spent 20 minutes trying to destroy my self-esteem so I'd be too hurt and angry to think clearly about what's really happening here. What's really happening here, Sarah says, her voice losing its careful modulation, is that you're being used by a man who has more money than most people see in a lifetime, and you're too blinded by the attention to see it. Maybe what's really happening is that a little girl is being used as a pawn in her parents' war, and I'm the first person in this situation who's actually thinking about what's best for her instead of what's most convenient for the adults. Sarah goes very still. Around them, the few remaining wedding guests are starting to take notice of their conversation, sensing tension even if they can't hear the specific words. You don't know anything about what's best for Lily, Sarah says. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to be 7 years old and caught between parents who are more interested in hurting each other than protecting their child. I know what it's like to wish that just once, one of the adults would put the kid first. Jasmine's voice carries a weight of personal experience that makes everyone within earshot pause. So here's what's going to happen, she continues. George and I are going to figure out how to build something honest and real that gives Lily the stable home environment she deserves. You're going to decide whether you want to be part of that solution or whether you want to keep using your daughter as a weapon in a war that should have ended years ago. Are you threatening me? Sarah queries. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice someone should have offered my parents 20 years ago. Put the child first, or watch someone else do it for you. The silence stretches between them, thick with implications. Finally, Sarah straightens her shoulders, reassembling her composed exterior. This isn't over, she says quietly. No, Jasmine agrees. It's not. But it's different now. Because now Lily has someone in her corner who remembers what it feels like to be her. Sarah turns and walks away without another word, her emerald dress disappearing into the crowd of departing guests. George stares after her, then at Jasmine. That was probably stupid, Jasmine finishes. I just made an enemy of someone who has the power to make both our lives very complicated. That was brave, George corrects. That was the most courageous thing I've ever seen anyone do. The custody hearing was 3 months ago. George got joint custody, not the primary custody he'd hoped for, but more time with Lily than he'd had before, and Sarah got the financial security of knowing that the Morrison Family Trust would continue to provide for their daughter's future. More importantly, the battle that had raged between them for 2 years finally began to cool. Not because they'd learned to like each other, but because they'd learned to prioritize Lily over their own wounded pride. Jasmine sits in Pike Place Market on a Saturday morning, watching George and Lily examine the fish displays with matching expressions of scientific fascination. Lily is explaining something about salmon migration patterns, her small hands gesturing animatedly while George listens with the devoted attention of a man who's learned that time with his daughter is precious and finite. And that's why they have to swim upstream, Lily concludes. turning to Jasmine with the expectant look of someone who's just shared important information. Did you know that? I did not know that, Jasmine admits. But it makes sense. Sometimes you have to work really hard to get back to where you belong. George catches her eye over Lily's head, and something passes between them. An understanding, a recognition, a promise that they're still figuring out day by day. They're not living together. That felt too fast, too much pressure on something that's still finding its shape. But George has a key to Jasmine's apartment now, and she has a drawer at his house, and Lily has accepted her presence with the adaptability of children who are used to adults figuring things out as they go. The custody arrangement isn't perfect. Sarah still finds ways to make things difficult, still uses every opportunity to remind everyone that Jasmine isn't Lily's real family. But the battles are smaller now, less vicious, focused on logistics rather than the fundamental question of who deserves to love this child. And Jasmine has learned something that surprises her. She's good at this. Good at helping a 7-year-old with homework, good at braiding hair and making pancakes and explaining why sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they love you any less. Good at being part of something bigger than herself. Can we get hot chocolate? Lily asks, bouncing slightly on her toes. The kind with the marshmallows that look like tiny snowmen? Obviously, we can get hot chocolate, George says, ruffling her hair. What kind of question is that? They make their way through the market, Lily chattering about everything she sees, George carrying the groceries they've accumulated, Jasmine walking slightly apart from them but clearly part of their unit. Other shoppers smile at them as they pass, just another family enjoying a Saturday morning together. But Jasmine knows it's more complicated than that. Knows that families aren't always created by birth or marriage. Sometimes they're created by choice, by the decision to show up for each other day after day, even when it's difficult, even when the future is uncertain. Hey, George says quietly, falling into step beside her while Lily examines a display of handmade jewelry. What are you thinking about? Just how different everything is from 6 months ago. Different how? Jasmine considers the question. 6 months ago, she was sitting alone at a wedding, convinced that love was something that happened to other people, something she could observe but never really experience herself. 6 months ago, she was so focused on protecting herself from hurt that she'd forgotten what it felt like to hope for something better. Different like, I used to think that being safe meant being alone, that trusting people was a luxury I couldn't afford. But it turns out that being alone isn't actually safer, it's just lonelier. George reaches for her hand and she lets him take it. Their fingers intertwine naturally, comfortably, like they've been doing this for years instead of months. I used to think that having money meant I could control everything, he says. That if I was wealthy enough, successful enough, I could protect the people I love from ever being hurt. But money can't buy trust. It can't buy the kind of love that makes you brave enough to be vulnerable. So what now? Jasmine asks. What do we do with all this wisdom we've accidentally acquired? George grins, and for a moment he looks nothing like the desperate man who approached her table at Olivia's wedding. Now we see what happens when two people who are terrible at trusting other people try to build something that requires trust. That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying. But also, he pauses, watching Lily negotiate with a vendor over the price of a friendship bracelet with the seriousness of a UN diplomat. Also kind of amazing. Olivia's first wedding anniversary party is smaller than the original celebration. Close friends and family gathered at the same vineyard where this all began. Jasmine and George arrived together, no longer pretending to be a couple but actually being one, no longer performing intimacy but living it. The changes are subtle but significant. Jasmine's dress is still beautiful, but she's not calculating its cost against her grocery budget anymore. George helped her find a financial advisor, and for the first time in her adult life, she has savings, has security, has the luxury of buying something because she likes it rather than because it serves multiple practical purposes. George is different too. More relaxed, more genuinely present. The desperate edge that drove him to approach a stranger at a wedding has been replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who's learned to fight for what matters without losing himself in the process. "Look at you two," Olivia says, appearing beside them with champagne and the satisfied expression of a matchmaker whose plan worked out better than expected. "I mean, I knew you'd be good together, but I had no idea you'd be this good together." "You knew we'd be good together?" Jasmine asks. "Olivia, we'd never even spoken before that night. Please, I've been trying to introduce you two for months. George, you used to come into the coffee shop every Tuesday specifically because you knew Jasmine would be there working. And Jasmine, you asked me about my friend's cute brother approximately 17 times before I finally figured out you meant George." Jasmine and George stare at each other, then at Olivia. "So when George called and asked if he could bring a date to the wedding, and you called and asked if it would be weird if you came alone, I might have encouraged the universe a little bit." "You set us up," George says slowly. "The whole thing was a setup." "Not the custody drama," Olivia clarifies quickly. "That was real and frankly terrifying to watch. But the initial meeting? I may have mentioned to Sarah that George was bringing someone, knowing she'd make things difficult, knowing he'd need moral support, knowing that Jasmine would be sitting alone and feeling out of place. "You manipulated us," Jasmine says, but she's laughing. "I facilitated a meeting between two people who were too scared of getting hurt to approach each other directly. There's a difference." "Is there?" George queries. "Yes, because my manipulation was designed to help you both get something you actually wanted, rather than to control an outcome that benefited only me. See? Totally different." They stand there for a moment, processing this revelation. Then Jasmine starts laughing. Really laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from recognizing the absurdity of life, the way the most important moments often arrive disguised as something else entirely. "So what you're saying," she manages between giggles, "is that George's desperate plea for help was actually part of an elaborate matchmaking scheme orchestrated by my best friend?" "The desperation was real," George protests. "The need for help was real. The attraction was definitely real. But the circumstances that forced us together were carefully arranged by someone who loves you both and got tired of watching you pine from a distance." Jasmine looks around the vineyard, at the same tables where they first held hands, at the dance floor where they learned to move together, at the spot where Sarah confronted her with truths that could have destroyed everything before it began. "Well," she says finally, "I guess I owe you a thank you." "You owe me a maid of honor speech at your wedding," Olivia corrects. "Because if you think I'm letting someone else take credit for this love story, you're absolutely insane." George chokes on his champagne. "Wedding? Who said anything about a wedding?" "Oh, please," Olivia rolls her eyes. "You bought a ring 3 months ago. Jasmine's been leaving bridal magazines around her apartment like she's 17 and planning her dream wedding. You're both terrible at subtlety." Jasmine looks at George, who has turned an interesting shade of red. "You bought a ring?" she asks. He may have been thinking about future possibilities. Future possibilities. Long-term planning. "George Morrison, are you planning to propose to me?" "I was planning to plan a proposal." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Jasmine asks, echoing Olivia's earlier question. George sets down his champagne glass, suddenly serious. "Actually, yes, there is a difference. Because a proposal should be about what we both want, not about what I think we should want, or what looks right from the outside, or what would be convenient for anyone else." He takes her hands, and Jasmine realizes that other guests are starting to notice their conversation, starting to form a loose circle around them. "So let me ask you, Jasmine Williams, Not because I have a ring, not because there's an audience, not because it would solve any practical problems. What do you want our future to look like? The question hangs in the air, weighted with possibility. Jasmine thinks about the girl she was a year ago, so afraid of being hurt that she couldn't imagine sharing her life with anyone. She thinks about the woman she's become, someone who's learned that love isn't about finding someone who'll never hurt you. It's about finding someone who'll choose you even when things get complicated. I want Saturday mornings at Pike Place Market, she says slowly. I want to help Lily with her science projects and argue with Sarah about bedtimes and figure out how to blend two very different lives into something that works for all of us. George nods, encouraging her to continue. I want to build something real with someone who sees me as a partner, not as a problem to be solved or a trophy to be won. I want to be chosen every day by someone who knows exactly who I am and loves me because of it, not in spite of it. And? George prompts gently. And I want to marry my best friend. The person who saw me sitting alone at a wedding and decided I looked like someone worth taking a chance on. The crowd around them erupts in cheers and applause. George is grinning like he's won the lottery, and maybe he has. They both have. So, is that a yes to the proposal I haven't technically made yet? He asks. That's a yes to whatever comes next, Jasmine says. As long as we figure it out together. George kisses her then, in front of everyone, surrounded by the same fairy lights and flower arrangements where they first learned to trust each other. It tastes like champagne and promises and the particular sweetness that comes from choosing love even when it's scary. When they break apart, Lily is there, having appeared from wherever 7-year-olds disappear to at adult parties. Does this mean you're going to be my stepmom? She asks Jasmine with the directness that only children can manage. Would you be okay with that? Jasmine asks. Lily considers this question with the seriousness it deserves. Will you still help me with my tide pool research? Obviously. And will you teach me how to make those pancakes that look like sea stars? I'll teach you to make pancakes that look like anything you want. And will you tell Daddy when he's being ridiculous so he doesn't embarrass me in front of my friends? Jasmine looks at George, who is indeed being slightly ridiculous in his happiness. I promise to tell your daddy when he's being ridiculous. Then yes, Lily declares. I think you should definitely be my stepmom. And that, Jasmine thinks, is how families are really made, not through grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but through small promises kept day after day, through the decision to choose each other even when it's difficult, through the gradual realization that home isn't a place but a feeling of being known and loved and chosen. The party continues around them, but for Jasmine, the real celebration is quieter, more personal. It's the recognition that the woman who sat alone at a wedding a year ago was not broken or inadequate or destined for loneliness. She was just waiting for the right person to whisper, "Pretend you're with me," and then discover that pretending wasn't necessary at all. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most desperate moments. Jasmine learned that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we're brave enough to trust again, even after we've been hurt. She learned that real love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone willing to work on their imperfections alongside yours. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that second chances are worth taking and that sometimes strangers become family, hit that subscribe button for more tales of unexpected transformation. And tell us in the comments, what moment of unexpected kindness changed your life? What desperate moment led to your greatest joy? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.